My name is Corey Wadeen, and today we're going to be talking about Chapter 7, How to Design Our Organization and Architecture with Conway's Law in mind. My partners Amy Storrs and Tyler Tucker are going to be helping me today. First, we're going to begin with the introduction. What is Conway's Law? Well, let me tell you it. Conway's Law states that the organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. The larger an organization is, the less flexibility it has, and the more pronounced the phenomenon. As we learn more about Conway's Law, we're going to go over certain topics that we see here in the introduction slide. The first topic is going to be understand organizational archetypes. The first one is functional. This is the division of labor and reducing costs. This helps the company thrive. If we have teams working together, such as server admins, network admins, and database admins, we can accomplish almost everything. And if these teams work with functional communication, nothing is impossible. Next, we're going to talk about the matrix. The matrix is kind of confusing. It's a little bit of both. So the matrix can have, for example, two managers. And if one individual employee is reporting to two managers, things get lost or confused, and this can cause issues. Last, market-oriented organizations, they respond to customer satisfaction. So for example, companies like Amazon, eBay, or even Netflix, all of these companies thrive off of customer satisfaction. If their market team is doing poorly, it will reflect in their sales and their projected goals. This leads us to our next slide. Examine problems often caused by overly functional orientation. Whenever an issue occurs in a team, we need to be able to take that problem to somebody. Most companies call this person the manager or director of a project. If we could take it to them, they can prioritize the work and set new goals so that way we can get this issue or error sorted out. When there's mistakes that cause gridlocks in projections or projects, it can really cause a disaster. This will increase costs, and it will also prolong the end goal date for the project. These issues usually occur when one person stumbles upon an error and it's not corrected. This can be found early on in a project, but if it gets to a later step in the project, it could be a disastrous error. This also leads us to enable market-oriented teams. To be successful with a DevOps outcome, we need to be able to enable a market-oriented group. Now, these teams work safely and independently quickly, so that way we can deliver to the customer satisfaction. We need to be able to pull from each group. So, for example, if you're an IT engineer or somebody that designs things, we're going to have you work with your specific skill set to help get the goal completed or to get the project completed. If we do this, we will be able to cut costs, and we'll also be able to maybe up the date for the end project. It also allows each individual team to focus on that customer's needs without giving up other tickets in order to do so. Next, Amy is going to take over, and she's going to teach us a little bit about making functional orientation work. Go ahead, Amy.
Thanks, Corey. As we look at making functional orientation work, we have to first start with how teams are traditionally formed. Traditionally, teams are formed in groups based off of a function of a team or a specific line of business, such that maybe the system administrators are together, and all the programmers are together, and all the network administrators are together, which can be difficult with large projects and everyone trying to communicate. So to make it more functional orientation requires that someone from each of those teams comes together as a smaller team to create a shared goal, which then focuses more on the customer satisfaction, the company goals, which overall is just going to allow for more trust, more transparency, and just easier to prioritize rather than looking at everyone's projects, looking at it from a small team. Top companies that utilize this format are like Etsy, Google, and GitHub, for example. I thought it was actually awesome that from Toyota, Mike Rother actually said that the roots of success lie in developing capability and habits in its people. So, as we move on to testing, operations, and security as everyone's job, we still have to take a step back to start and look at how security kind of started. It was a single person's role just to make sure the website was secure and the application, maybe it needed to be encrypted. But now we move forward to today, and security is truly everyone's job. So by making this part of the high performing team, everyone is keep being aware and making sure that their systems are secure and is having quality systems, and the availability is there for those systems. And so I think a perfect example of this is Facebook in 2009. When they changed their on-call to a rotating between the managers and the engineers and the architects and all the different groups that went into creating the website, they kind of each had an eye-opening experience so that they could each see the feedback, see the impact it had on the end users and each of their internal teams. So it gave them a better understanding of what was happening so they can make better decisions. As we move on to enable every team member to be a generalist, we have to see why this is needed. So the issue with everyone being a specialist is that you really start with everyone having their own niche, their own little piece of the pie. So when this happens, they become very focused on their piece, but sometimes the bigger picture is lost. It kind of creates everyone to think of their own little silo and their own little world. So they're not really looking at the other teams and all the things that go into the bigger picture. So by enabling every team member to be a generalist, they're learning. They're learning some of the other areas that they wouldn't normally have that exposure to. They're seeing how they can troubleshoot better, and maybe that leads them to building the system better. So it helps to create that growth mindset, allows for more adaptability and flexibility, all of which make teams more productive. So we then move on to our next topic of funding the projects or versus funding the services. So traditionally, most departments are looking to fund one project at a time. So the team works on one project that has its funding, then we all move to the next project. As soon as that one is done, there's another project waiting. Or if you work where I do, you just work on all 10 projects at once, and they all have different funding sources. So it can be very difficult when you fast forward and have to look at how are we going to sustain the system? How are we going to grow it in the future? Because the funding only came in the beginning. So the fix for this is actually enabling the teams to look at funding those services and the products directly so that over time there's the availability to expand the product, to upgrade it, to maybe make a complete change in it, but that availability is there. So I thought it was a great quote when it said that practices that fund and empower value streams rather than projects while still maintaining financial controls by establishing portfolios in those value streams. So then we have that broader picture and we give more functionality in the end. Next, we're actually going to move and hear back from Tyler.
All right, this next slide is create loosely coupled architectures to enable developer productivity and safety. Some of the main ideas here is keeping a loosely coupled architecture helps to keep the system flexible. So we want to focus on flexibility, scalability, and compartmentalization. Now, if we are able to divide the system into certain parts, and really compartmentalize it, we're not going to affect the whole system when we update part of it. We want to be able to do each part separately so we don't have to update the entire hundreds, maybe thousands of different moving parts at the same time. Would slow things down significantly. Basically, the developer should be able to update the code without an in-depth knowledge of the other components. They can focus on their section as well. The next thing I want to talk about is keeping team sizes small using the 2-pizza team rule. This was started, I believe, by Amazon, at least the concept as we know it now. It's to keep a team small enough to be fed with 2 pizzas. And some of the benefits of this is that everyone on the team is able to know about the system, pretty good knowledge of it because of the fast communication between them. It helps decentralize the power and enable autonomy, and employees can gain leadership experience where failure has smaller consequences because of the smaller system. In conclusion, we want to focus on some of these key points that we discussed in this chapter to compartmentalize, to avoid disrupting the whole system, to speed things up, and to increase communication and leadership. Keep teams small, to increase as well, to value the achievement of customer and company goals, to enable every employee to work across the system, not just having these frozen specialists, but to be able to cross-train everybody so that there's a great understanding, and that all employees are responsible for testing, operations, and security, as well as other things. That responsibilities are primarily with the department that they are responsible for, but that all employees are responsible to help carry the load.